Good morning and welcome. I call to order the Board of Health meeting for September 25th, 2024. And we do have a quorum. Do you have any introduction or guests?
We have no introductions today.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment today?
No public comment.
Moving right along, we move to the consent agenda. All items listed below with the bullet point are considered routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless a board member requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered and installed from the agenda. Does any member of the board wish to remove an item? If not, I would entertain a motion.
The consent agenda as presented.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. I'm sorry, when I have you read this. So.
Okay, August 28th, 2024, Yakima Health District Board of Health meeting minutes. Accounts payable and payroll issued in August 2024 in the amount of $1,130,270.08.
Thank you. So we do have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Commissioner. I heard you. Motion passes. We have now today our spotlight, which is from enforcement to empowerment, collaborative food safety approach. And Sean McGee will present.
Good morning, everyone. So looking at how we're approaching our food safety program and the partnerships that we're building and kind of the new era of food safety and public health is what we're going to be diving into today. Next slide, please. So the foundation of our food safety program and kind of our responsibility in that program lies within the Washington State Retail Food Code, WAC 246-215. This code also aligns with the FDA Retail Food Safety Code. It has the goal of supporting and giving the minimum requirements for food establishments to conduct to fulfilling food safety requirements and operate, within the state laws on what's required for retail food safety. The goal of public health's role in this is to reduce the incidence of foodborne illness by facilities are adhering to the food code and other food safety requirements. Some local jurisdictions have more stringent requirements in the food code. But the preferred method here is through education, risk communication, to ensure operators are aware of risks and they have the tools and knowledge to mitigate those risks on site. Next slide, please. So over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a shift happening within food safety regulation, kind of phasing out the old style of food restaurant inspections, food establishment inspections. Kind of think of the white glove, the floors, ceilings, the walls, the countertops. Those are fairly low risk issues that contribute to foodborne illness outbreaks. And the more of the focus now is on risk factors that are directly linked to foodborne illness outbreaks, such as lack of temperature control, employee illness and hygiene, and avenues for cross-contamination, air-hand contact. Also, that we're focusing on good retail practices such as general sanitation of the facility, proper plumbing fixtures, and storage of personal belongings, which doesn't really come to mind, but we've gone into facilities and people are enjoying a cigarette in the kitchen. So, that's a no-no. So we want to, make sure people are aware of that and they know that. And instead of, coming in and, being the food police, we want to be more educational and have them aware of these things, beforehand. But yes, there's an increased emphasis on critical risk factors over good retail practices in today's food safety industry. Next slide, please. Sorry, I got an eyelash in my eye. It's really bugging me. Anyway, so looking at how our approach has evolved, in 2020, the FDA rolled out a new era of food safety, as they call it. There's 4 core areas to this. So there's technology-enabled traceability of food products and outbreak responses, smarter tools and approaches for prevention, new business models and retail modernization, and also a shift in food safety culture. So we'll dive into each of those. Next slide, please. So tech-enabled traceability and outbreak response is looking at, this happens primarily at the federal level, and it builds on the 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act. The goal here is improved labeling and record keeping, and utilizing technology to track those labels and records into different, they call them blockchains of food products, that improves industry's ability to track these products through distribution. This makes it much simpler to link foodborne illness outbreaks to specific products and to track where those products were distributed. For example, when we get a recall of a food product, we can use this technology to determine where this food product has been distributed throughout Yakima County, specific to what specific store, and we can notify those grocery stores or those restaurants of what products have a recall on them, and they can pull those things out of the shelves or pull it out of use in the restaurant, which is preventing foodborne illness. All that tracking and stuff happens at the federal level, and then the information trickles down to locals for us to, make those calls. Next slide, please.
So smarter tools and approaches for prevention. This is a fairly new system that we're working with in collaboration with the state. It is being led primarily by the CDC, but the goal here is to increase the amount of foodborne illnesses that are reported to local health jurisdictions, and also streamline our coordination with the state and the CDC when there is a foodborne illness or foodborne illness outbreak. So the state of Washington Department of Health rolled out what's called the Foodborne Illness Notification System, or FINS, which why there's a shark eating a hamburger.
Sharks like hamburgers.
Gotta be it.
So this system is housed by the State Department of Health, and it uses secure software for the intake of reports of foodborne illness and complaints. Those reports and complaints are assigned by LHJ based on the origin of the complaint. So what, if we get an illness or a complaint that's based out of Yakima County and it goes into the FINS system, it comes back to us and we're able to respond and also coordinate through the state through that system. So if there's an outbreak response that we engage in, the state can see the case information as well. That way, if the state has to get pulled into a large outbreak response, they're already up to speed and there's already been that collaboration. It's meant to streamline the outbreak and being able to identify the extent of it and where the origin of it is and stop it. Next slide, please. Talking about new business models and retail modernization, this largely came about during the years where we were dealing with COVID, a large part of that when the COVID restrictions were in place. So since 2020, we've seen significant expansion of food business models. For example, grocery delivery services, online marketplace sales, food delivery apps. And this presents a unique situation with these food delivery apps because there may be multiple apps and multiple services that utilize one kitchen. We call them ghost kitchens. So if there is a complaint through one app, it's hard to trace. It could be difficult to trace back to what specific kitchen that app is using. However, that's one of the things we are dealing with, which, if we have a licensed kitchen, they don't always have what food delivery services they utilize in that kitchen. So that's been one of the challenges, and hopefully the FINS program will help us track that down. Another modernization or new things coming out. It's not new, but it's expanding rapidly. It's what's called Cottage Foods program. This is an avenue in which folks can have their private home kitchen license through the Washington State Department of Agriculture. That program is shifting to the State Department of Health, and there's lots of talks around local health jurisdictions' role in that program. We don't have a role yet, but we have a feeling that's coming. But this is a program where people can make baked goods, jams, and jellies in-home in their private kitchen. So how we would be able to license and track those, more modern ways of retail food is possibly could be a challenge that we're looking at in the future.
Sean?
Yeah.
So that kind of program is just if they would be involved in commercial sales, right? It's not for personal.
Yeah, it's a private home kitchen.
Yeah.
To create food products for retail. Yeah. Next slide, please. So looking at food safety culture, there's been a big shift in, like I said, in how we look at food safety through the lens of public health and how we conduct our inspections and how we ensure compliance of all of our food establishments in Yakima County. We've really increased the emphasis on the role of the operator of a food establishment, teaching them what active managerial control of an establishment means. So we are in a facility just a few days out of the year. It's our job to make sure that food establishment operators have the knowledge and the tools to be successful in the arena of food safety the other 360 plus days a year that we're not there. So with that comes an increased focus on education. More photo-based education, story-based examples, and hands-on training with our operators. And we've also noticed and acknowledged that regulators or our inspectors, you know, they're reading administrative codes all the time, learning what the rules and the laws are, what the proper procedures are. And they do that by a lot of reading on paper. They learn well that way, but our food establishments, not so much. They're more hands-on. They want to see how it works and what the right way to do things in. They want hands-on examples. So we've responded to that. And we'll get into more of that in a couple slides. Next slide. One thing that we've been really proactive on is the new requirement for certified food protection managers. This is part of the Washington State's 2022 update to the Retail Food Code, and it went into effect March of 2023. So through our inspections and our work in the food industry, we realized there was a large need to bring a resource to this issue. Food operators were having a hard time traveling or gaining access to a reliable internet with a webcam. It's a proctored exam they have to take, so getting that scheduled. In the food industry, we recognize your schedule is not really normal. You know, you work a long hours. You know, you don't always work just 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So getting this done has been proven to be difficult for a lot of restaurants. So we reallocated some of our FDA grant funds to provide a certified food protection manager course here at the health district. This allowed us to offer the course at no cost through 2024. It's offered in English and Spanish, and we've so far had 75 signups total. So we have a queue of people to get through the exam through the rest of this year. So far, we've had 30 complete the course. And we have another course coming up in November. There's about a 70% pass rate nationally for this course, which is right on par with what we're seeing in our county. So people are utilizing the service that we're bringing. You know, it can be well over $100 to take this course, and we're providing it here right now for this year through a grant. So we're trying to get our food establishments in line with the new requirements and giving them a resource to do so much easier than if they had to do it.
John, what happens when folks don't get that certification?
So it is an item on our food inspection form that we're required to mark out. It's a low point violation, so they don't automatically fail an inspection if they're out of that. But we typically write on there when our next course is going to be, and you know, so we give them a date. And you know,
74 doesn't sound like a lot for a county of our size.
Well, we just got it started this year, so as the information gets out there, we'll get more. But there are a few people, we go into restaurants and they have one. They have a CFPM certified person on site. And so it's not 100% of restaurants we're going out there are not in compliance with it. Right? When we do run into it, we tell them we have this course, because a lot of them say, you know, we don't have access to internet at home, or we don't have a webcam. We can't schedule the time that the proctors are available. So we tell them through our inspections, like, we have these courses on these dates, and you don't have to pay anything. Come on over.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Is it the certification for the establishment or for an individual?
For an individual,
So they,
and the
if they go
established,
to a new workplace.
someone else would technically have to get it.
But
Yeah.
they take that with them
Yeah.
in their new workplace.
Yep, it's assigned to the individual. And each establishment's required to have one certified food protection manager on staff. Not on site at all times, but on staff. Next slide, please. So with all this modernization and changes in the food safety culture that are happening over the last few years, we've recognized the need for increased education. And the need that we provide more in-person and hands-on technical approach to this education. So back in December, we held a virtual food safety town hall. It was in English and Spanish, had slideshows and examples on how to be successful in different food safety topics, such as the critical risk factors I mentioned before. And then in May, at the beginning of our busy temporary food event season, we had an info session that went over all the different requirements to be a permitted temporary food vendor in Yakima County, what you're required to have on site, what are the minimum requirements to pass an inspection, because we inspect every single temporary food vendor. And this info session also covered, you know, just some of the vastness of this program and how to, our applications are pretty lengthy. We ask for a lot of information, how to successfully, sorry, next slide. How to successfully go through our application process and, you know, why these temporary food vendors don't have to have the same requirements as a brick and mortar or an annual license. They don't serve as many people. It's limited food items and they're only serving for a limited amount of time, which is lower risk, means they don't have the same requirements as an annually licensed facility.
Sean, how do you identify when somebody is starting to do that? We have a lot of traveling food vendors. How do you identify who they are? And
I mean, we built a history and a relationship with most of them. We have a lot of regulars, but you know, we have a lot that we don't see. A lot of them come from out of county, out of state even. For example, the fair. Many of the vendors at the fair are from out of state. So they typically are not operating out of a food truck, like a licensed mobile food unit, and they're not operating in a brick and mortar. It's more meant for, you know, the pop-up tent style. They got a grill and a flat top out there cooking whatever their food is, and they're only serving for that day or for a few days at that event. So what we have a permit for that allows them to operate at a single event for 21 consecutive days. So if they're operating in a different event during that time, they have to get a different temporary food event license.
And Mayor Byers, also the relationships that are built are not just with the vendors for the food, but also with the event organizers.
Yes.
So that helps tremendously to know if they're going to serve food, whom we have to speak with.
Yeah, and you know, we have our help desk person, Edith, up front, who helps folks go through the application process if it's their first time, because a lot of that information can be kept a little technical and not something that every food operator really thinks about. They always know it, but not until we ask questions a specific way. And to give you some stats, in 2023, we processed over 800 temporary food event applications. And in 2024, we are approaching 800, and we're only we're coming on the end of the third quarter of the year. So we're going to surpass last year's temporary food event license permits by a long shot. So, and we inspect at each and every one. So the more that these vendors know how to be successful, the easier it is on us as well. Next slide, please.
Commissioner McKinney has a question.
Oh, yes, Commissioner McKinney.
Thank you, Sean. I thought maybe this was a good time to ask a question since you're talking about more temporary. You and I had a citizen who was questioning, you know, how we could better support our nonprofit booster clubs. And I had asked if we could possibly use that grant program to allow an opportunity for them to not have to pay, you know, that heightened fee simply because obviously they're trying to raise money and they don't get a lot. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that effort to try and make it so that some of our smaller nonprofits, especially like booster clubs where those kids are selling cookies and cupcakes and not necessarily having the funds to come up with the food permitting requirements.
Yes. So the challenge that I'm running into with that right now is a lot of the nonprofits would sell what would be exempt food items. However, that a lot of them are, you know, baking these food products in the privacy of their own homes, a home kitchen, and they don't have a cottage food permit, which without that, there's no allowance in the food code to allow the retail sale of those things. So I'm kind of stuck on that right now and still digging into that. So I don't have a good answer on that yet. And I was contacted by another person who has similar concerns. So it's something I'm still working on, still in progress.
Sean, looking at the fee schedule, what are these folks applying for?
The temporary TFE or temporary event permit,
$54.
$54.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, Commissioner McKinney, we also have to research the issues of what would be referred to in government as gifting. So if we are allowing the payment for one establishment, but not the payment for another establishment. So that's something that the auditors would look at pretty seriously, that you're gifting of public funds essentially. So
no, I appreciate the perspective, Andre, very much. And that's Sean and I were talking about running it in the sense of like we offer the program he just spoke to, you know, being able to come and have it because it's paid for by a grant. Similarly, how we offer the food safety handlers permit at no cost to young adults. So that's kind of what I was inquiring about, but I really appreciate, Sean, that you're continuing to look into it. And I just want to compliment you on always trying to find solutions that keep the community safe, but are also just trying to bring some common sense into the equation. So I just appreciate you very much.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you on this when I have more answers.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good question. Go ahead, Sean.
Next slide, please. So in tying this all together for to have the most successful temporary food event program possible, and this will certainly expand into more arenas of our food safety program. And I also got to give kudos to Lillian and her team and the staff on my team that worked on this and brought this very successful event together. We recently held a community workshop in person for temporary food vendors. This was an interactive workshop that was complete with slideshows and presentations. Everything was presented in English and in Spanish. It also was, we had mock setups so we could demonstrate mock inspections, demonstrate to vendors, this is what a successful level 1 event would look like, or level 2 or level 3, and those levels are associated with the risk factor based on the food they're preparing. So it went from kind of the most basic food items that you could serve at a booth to the most complex food items you can serve, and what those setups look like and what you need to have on site to be in compliance and be successful. It was well attended. We had over 25 vendors in attendance, and we got excellent feedback from the attendees and the organizers of this event. And I believe there was even an article in the paper about it. So we're really happy with how that turned out and what that can lead to us hosting in the future or collaborating with our industry partners on in the future. Next slide, please. So some upcoming initiatives that we are looking at is, again, expanding on our community-based workshop that we recently had. Development of new educational resources. How can we provide more hands-on trainings such as informational videos, informational pictures, kind of like storylines on or timelines on how you need to set up and what rules you need to be aware of, and you know just what you need to do to be aware and successful in operating your business. The continuance of our certified food protection manager trainings and testing. And then next year, we're discussing what a food safety newsletter could look like. Would it be, you know, what information will be on there, kind of hot topics, things to look out for. And that can be based on what we're seeing in the field through our inspections, different rule updates coming up. You know, is that going to be monthly, quarterly? You know, lots to figure out there, but we're excited about the potential for a food safety newsletter going out.
That would also include information on trainings coming up, opportunities like that.
Oh, certainly, yeah, we have course dates for our certified food protection manager, advertise that people are welcome to come in and get their food handler card anytime. You know, those sorts of things. Next slide, please. So, all this work that we're doing in a food safety program, it is delivering our mandated services. Food safety program is a mandated service of the health district. We're just expanding beyond the basic framework of that program. We're working with partners in the food industry to do things like community-based workshops, to get info sessions out there, and other education outreach. So we're expanding our network of partners that you know, understand that food safety is necessary and there's a right way to do it, and also understand the health district is more than just the food police. We want people to be successful, and we want to lend a helping hand whenever we can. And increasing the effectiveness and efficiency of our services. It's you know, I think if we can teach people as much around the good retail food practices and increase their knowledge prior to us being out there for an inspection, we're obviously going to run into less issues out in the field, which means our inspectors can do more inspections in any given day. We're reaching more people than just one-on-one during an inspection, which is great training. One-on-one is great. But if we can effectively train people, multiple people in one group setting versus going to one restaurant at a time, we're certainly reaching more people, which is much more effective than one-on-one. So, next slide. Any questions?
One question, the incidents of the different violations that you're citing people on, do you have a breakdown of sort of what are the most common citations that you're issuing versus?
Yeah, we're working on that, actually. We're working on pulling that information out of our inspection reports and our permit management system, and building you know, spreadsheets and graphs on what are the biggest issues that we're seeing, what's the most common, and how can we address those. So we are putting all that data together. Something you're interested in seeing, we can certainly.
It could be, when you have that done, nice to be able, for the board to be able to see that.
Yeah. And is there a hotline or anything if somebody sees like a gross violation that the public might be able to call in and say, hey, this doesn't look right?
Well, a lot of people have my phone number, but they got my direct line.
You are the hotline.
Yeah, but in addition to that, I think that the most common knowledge out there is they can call our help desk phone number, which is widespread and pretty much on every piece of information we hand out. In addition to that, we have our environmental health emergency line that people call our front desk, and they have an option to leave a message on the emergency line, which gets routed directly to myself. So, yeah, we get food complaints on those. What's that?
Fins.
Oh, yeah, and the FINS program. The more that gets information about that gets put out into the community, I'm sure we'll see an increase in that. And we're already getting about 3 to 5 notifications on FINS a week. So,
and interesting, Dr. Atterbury too, because it's widespread, we've actually been able to capture data that people would be comfortable mentioning publicly. So we've had circumstances where people knew that there were operators who were doing something that was illegal or really was at risk to the public's health, and they've been able to communicate that. And then we're able to go out and do inspections in a very subtle way, which allows people to have privacy, but also addresses the issue. So it's worked out well.
And I'll just quickly add that people do send pictures to our social media account, so that is a casual way, and we forward it on to the EH team. So
Sure.
That does get checked.
And you can also go to the website and look at past reports. So you can just scroll through the latest restaurant inspections and you can see common.
Names.
The where not to go list.
Now that's,
About that.
but that is board support. Look at that board commitment on a Saturday night.
I show him that.
I liked it.
We talk food safety.
Now, I will say, yes, those reports are online, but those critical risk factors that we run into and identify in an establishment, those are required to be corrected on site. So if we've been there and we've marked that violation, it has been corrected while we were there. So we didn't leave them saying, figure it out. We show them what the right way is, and we have them do that on site. So
Right.
Because I would imagine, I guess, Sean, what I'm suggesting is I would imagine that, at least theoretically, it's probably more common for the employees to be the source of potential contamination rather than the facility knowingly being a source of contamination. I would think that your numbers might show that, but maybe I'll be surprised.
yeah, we don't target like an individual employee or a person. If we notice that somebody isn't knowledgeable in food safety, we may quiz them, and then, direct them towards different training courses and stuff that would benefit them. And we do that with the manager on duty at every inspection. We seek out what's called, adequate knowledge and, demonstrates active managerial control. It's a requirement in our inspections. So we do make sure that the knowledge is there. And then if it's just not being trickled down to staff, we show them, this is the best way to do that. But yes, employee introduced illnesses are one of the critical risk factors. That's why hand hygiene is so important. A sick food worker policy at restaurants is very important. And then, overall just sanitation of the facility.
Sean, if someone requests a Spanish speaking inspector, we provide that bilingual support. Or
yeah, this is something we deal with every day. Not, we have Spanish speaking inspectors. We try to get them into the Spanish speaking facilities, but they far outnumber what 2 inspectors can do. So we do have non-Spanish speaking staff that go into establishments where there's a Spanish speaker only. Most of the time there's somebody in there that can translate, or we can call Edith at the front at the help desk, or call one of the other 2 inspectors, like, can you help me out? But a lot of our staff have, really developed just casual kitchen Spanish skills, so they can get through an inspection. But the important thing we want to do is be able to make sure that the staff at the food establishment really understands what we're trying to convey to them, not just the violations, but this is how you can fix it. This is where you can find this information. And we do have kind of how-to guides in both English and Spanish that we pass out that's specific to these critical violations.
thank you.
Kitchen Spanish.
Thing.
Yeah.
I lost all.
Probably is.
Any other questions for Sean? Thank you, Sean, very much. We will move on into our agency reports. We'll start with Executive Director Andre Custis.
Good morning, thank you to the board and also to those watching. Really appreciate the time. I wanted to share a couple of things. First off, after our presentation, thank you to Sean and to the team, and certainly to the collaborative effects internally. We work as a team here, so when Sean was referencing our work with Williams, we're talking about staff members working on community investments. And so the idea of being trusted communicators is not just environmental specialists, it's those who put these events on together and convey this information. So we're really grateful for that. Also, when we talk about foodborne illness, it sounds like we're talking about restaurant inspection, but really that transitions very quickly to a medical concern. So that's one of the reasons that we work so closely in public health agencies, because if you have a foodborne illness and it spreads dramatically, then you're talking about all sorts of illness and histories and medical discussions that have to go through, again, the department that's supported by Melissa. So it becomes quite an interesting process. And we have a lot of people who visit from out of town, sometimes out of state. So if you have a foodborne illness, that can spread quickly and then become a tremendous amount of work that then becomes having to be lab supported, and then we're moving on to discussions with other entities, both in other regions of the state and even in other states. So it quickly can become a serious issue and a concern. We also have these issues in places like nursing homes, when you have an illness that can really dramatically impact people who are already impaired physically. So it's something that we take seriously. But the bottom line I wanted to convey is my appreciation to the team and understanding that, again, we're here to support others and be a trusted communicator of important issues. So even internally, we've realized that some people don't understand the efforts that we put into things. So we've been trying to explain that. When we do temporary food events, those are on someone else's timetable. So if the event is in the evening on a weekend, or if it's on a holiday, it's a celebration, that's something that our team is going out to do. So we appreciate the staff in being available and doing that, again, nights, weekends, holidays, and so forth. But that's sometimes something that we don't convey to the public. We have a help desk team, and it's not just one person on help desk, but we always have somebody on help desk to support people. That's an investment that we're making on behalf of the citizens so that they have a place to call in or a place that they can go visit. That's really quite an antique concept in this day and age, that you can actually show up and speak to somebody who's available with you, or pick up the phone and speak to a person who can answer your questions. But we make that effort. We're trying to better explain that to the community so they understand that this is a community investment that we're making. And we're excited about the idea of education, because again, we realize that as regulators, there is an authority that we have. We don't lead with that authority. What we lead with is opportunity for people to do the right thing to make people safe. And of course, it's in their best interest to keep people safe. That's what keeps people coming back to your restaurant. So it's an exciting partnership, but it is a partnership with business that we take very seriously. Thank you for that. I wanted to begin by recognizing my gratitude that we're in a different phase of the seasons. And so we're having less concerns around things like fire and smoke and power shutoffs. I hate to even say it out loud because I'm afraid the power will shut off at my house, but we had a lot to do starting in the late spring around this issue. And I want to thank the board for their understanding that we were responding to the needs of the community, but really in an unprecedented way in this valley. We continue to make that clear to our partners at the state level. There will be state gatherings next month, statewide public health meetings and so forth, and we'll be part of that. And we're spending a lot of time talking to our partners about the fact that things are unique in Eastern Washington. We have geographic and really seasonal concerns that don't always affect other parts of the state. And we want them to understand that it's very important that they recognize the difficulties that we have. It seems pretty commonplace for us to have things like droughts, but I don't think that folks on the west side sometimes understand that when a drought comes, that means there's less irrigation. Less irrigation means more arid land. More arid land means more fire, potentially. So we're trying to explain that to people on the front end so that they can understand why we take it so seriously. So that's something that we're working on. I want to thank the board for their understanding, because it was a tremendous amount of work for the team. And it was also a tremendous work of our community partners in responding to all the fires. So we are moving into, and you'll hear more from Ryan, but we'll be moving into cold weather shelter time here. That's really our concern now. So it's updates on what we do with respect to staying in advance of an issue and being prepared for that. I also wanted to share that we will talk a lot about budget today. We have a strong budget. I won't take anything away from Chase, but we have good news. We have a good budget. It's a strong budget, and we're pleased because a tremendous amount of effort went into that. But again, Chase will be talking a lot about that. And also we're talking about more community issues in the future, which is part of our what we call our enhanced budget. So we can talk about some investments, but for the purpose of time, I'll keep it short, and I can add as we're introducing the budget, unless you have questions.
And no questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fresco. We will move on to our Chief Operating Officer, Ryan.
All right, last month I mentioned that we have 4 Board of Health member positions that their terms expire at the end of this year. And those are 2 city representative positions, which are Council Member Carrillo and Mayor Byers, and then also the two citizen positions, which are Dr. Atterbury at large. citizen representative position, and then stepping out into the state. So we've been advertising in the newspaper, on our website, on our social media, and also through YVCOG, who sent letters to all the cities. These positions do close at midnight on October 6th. And then on October 16th, we'll be sending all the board members all the applicant information so they can review them before next board meeting. And then if there are more than two applicants for a position, then you can vote on the next board meeting on who to move forward for interviews. So if you are a board member whose terms expire, make sure you get your application and resume in before October 6th.
Not all mine.
Yeah. All right, any questions on that?
Ryan, the commissioners appoint the citizens, the 2 citizen representatives in the cities.
Okay, so how that works is the city ones go to the county commissioners, and then they do their own interviews and then appoint the city one, it's representatives. The citizen ones, the Board of Health will vote for the top 2, which will then go to the county commissioners to select candidate.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on our budget timeline, Chase will be introducing the budget today during his report. Over the next month, we will be advertising our budget on the website and the newspaper, or I'm sorry, for a public hearing on our website and in the Yakima Herald and also at our front desk. And then the vote will be for next in the October meeting. We'll vote on approval for the budget. On emergency response, we do continue to work internally and with our partners both on the H5N1 and the power outage responses. We're continuing to maintain situational awareness both on local and nationwide on the effects of or what's happening for H5N1. And then also evaluating response efforts to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of future responses. As Andre mentioned, we do move, our focus is moving from wildfires and the smoke to extreme weather responses. And so we're planning with Yakima Valley Office of Emergency Management for winter shelters. We do have one open position at the Health District, which is our grants and contract coordinator. And that position does close on October 6th. And then we do have one closed position, which is our public health technician position that closed on Sunday. So we are going through those applications and we'll be reaching out to people in the next few days to schedule interviews. That will hopefully be next week. That's all I have.
Questions for Mr. Eilach? Thank you. We will move on to our financial report and change order.
Good morning. We'll go ahead and dive into the 2025 budget. I will start off to say that this budget was a bit of a surreal experience. It is normal, it is routine to have a budget for next year, but next year being 2025 is a little mind blowing, you know, because the future is now, right? Where are flying cars, our teleportation devices, and we should have been invaded by aliens at least twice by now, but here we are. Going into 2025, we have 55 full-time equivalents on our budget for next year. That is an increase by two full FTEs. Those 2 additional FTEs are in our environmental health program. We are adding an EH coordinator and a public health specialist. We are having a bit of a shakeup at the director position. Ryan, would you mind speaking toward that?
Sure. When we hired about a year and a half ago, we hired a program manager in our division of public health partnerships. That person oversaw the DD program, or breast and cervical health program, and also our front desk program. There was a thought that when we created that management position, that eventually someday it would become its own division. We wanted to make sure that we found the right person, that we set no timeline on it. We have had a person in that position for a year and a half. And now the timing is right to create its own division. So we will be creating on January 1st, the Division of Community Programs, which will be those 3, the front desk, the DP program, the CHP program, And Gabby Alvarez is our director, and she will start attending these meetings in January.
Awesome. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna add on, Gabby started on as our accountant in 2021, I believe it was. Yeah, and so she's excellent. She's really great to work with. I'm very happy and grateful for her. She's really taken a lot off of my plate as she's moved through these, as she's progressed here.
I wanted to share that when we actually thought of this, we used the template for when Lillian came and joined us. When we assumed the responsibilities of the developmental disabilities program from the county, it meant a tremendous amount more oversight and accountability in terms of finances. We didn't want to overwhelm Lillian as a new director. So that was something that continued, but that expanded into her role. One of the reasons we're also doing this is it allows us to focus again on community investments and community partnerships, community education, which is difficult to do when Lillian is also running other parts of our division that are frankly multi-million-dollar in their responsibilities. A lot of it is money that goes to serve the people. The money follows the individual in the developmental disabilities program, and in our breast, silver, colon health program, it actually provides for services that are directly served by subcontractors. So it's a tremendously important program, but fiscally, it's a lot to overcome. And so Gabriella's background in finance with us is helpful, but it also will allow the teams that Lillian is working with to spend more time investing in community issues. So it's really an efficiency and allows us to be more effective in the community.
So that wraps up our FTEs. The next page, page 2. This is the summary of our programs. I'm not necessarily going to speak to each individual line item, but if you do have a question, please let me know. The top programs being our indirect programs, we're having a slight shift of more FTEs to the indirect. We're having a shift within our FTHS and COVID, and so we're seeing a slight shift in that. Foundational Public Services, again, is one of our larger funding sources for the next year for 2025. We have approximately 22 FTEs for that. We have a decrease in internal capital investments. That's mainly our operating budget for the building remodel. However, we have shifted that into our enhanced, which we'll see here in a few minutes. My favorite part about this budget this year is our COVID-19 response. We have no funding, no FTEs for that. So I'm really happy that is sunsetting, so to speak, and we are moving on. That is by far my favorite part of this budget.
My favorite part is a balanced budget, but
that's nice too, but you know. And again, moving into the environmental health, we're seeing currently, as we all know, there is an emphasis right now on groundwater. We are looking across the valley. There's issues within the groundwater, and now we're seeing to see state, local funding heading more towards our groundwater issues. We're getting additional funding from Department of Health for Guanima and for PFAS activities. That wraps up the summary, unless there's any specific questions. And again, you have a month to chew on this. So if you have any questions throughout the month, please reach out, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just really quick,
yes, sir.
The developmental disability. I'm just trying to comprehend this. So like we get 3.4 million or so dollars for that program, but it only uses 2.8 FTEs. So like what?
A lot of that is pass through. Yeah. So for our providers, so like Intrust, some other ones like that. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. Yes, on some of those ones, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on their names. But a lot of that is completely pass through. Yes. They do the majority of the work. They would be sub-recipients, so we have contracts. We audit those contracts and make sure that they are living up to that. But yeah, that is mainly pass through. Yeah.
And the idea of bringing that developmental disability budget from the county to the health department, what's the thought process there in terms of what are we doing that the county couldn't do, or vice versa, I guess?
Well, at the time, the county had a county human services division, and it had the homeless program, it had this, aging and long-term care. When that was transitioning, the county, was thinking about not continuing that department, so we took on the responsibility of the developmental disabilities program. That's remained with us. We do that on behalf of a partnership with the county. So every county has to have a developmental disability objective. Again, the money follows the client. So if a family member has a client who has needs, additional needs, that money then flows into the county through this process. So we've enjoyed having it because it's allowed us, again, to be focused on community issues. It's reaching families, it's reaching people who not only want to learn new skills, but also be independent. And so it's really, from a public health mission standpoint, it's been a wonderful partnership with the county.
And as an example from the statewide, are there other counties where this is the model that they're using versus the county running it?
There is, the majority are county, it's the Association of County Human Services, basically. And so, it's ACHS, it's, it continues to be something that we do. There are actual departments in the state that do all of the mental health and substance abuse and everything. We don't have that system here. So there's a number of it. You can speak to it better than I can, Lillian.
Oh, it's accurate. There's a couple, most DD programs are within the county, but there are a couple that are within the public health department specifically. Personally, I really have enjoyed being able to have the program here because, as you hear, we do a lot of information, education, and outreach, and that's not always the case in some other counties. So I do believe that's been a really great fit as we've been able to incorporate more of that, because it is really confusing for lots of families, that we've been able to grow those pieces specifically, as I'll speak to in a little bit. So, but yes, to answer your question directly, there are, but much more are within the counties themselves.
That's because many counties, we're kind of unique in the sense that this is an independent structure. A lot of the counties actually, the health department is part of the county.
And I know this is an aside from the budget, but I want to also share that we're addressing needs in the community that are sometimes misunderstood. Sometimes there's this idea that a family has an issue around a certain specific problem or a concern or a barrier. And the reality is that people are living their lives and times are tough. And so we're able to reach families in many avenues. And this is why it's so critical for us to be able to maintain these partnerships. It was a lot of work to incorporate it. And as you see, as Commissioner Curtis said, why do we have such a small team? We try to keep it exceedingly efficient. Same thing in our BCHP program, so that the money goes essentially to the community.
Where was that transition? We took that over.
2015,
15, 16, somewhere there. So it's been there a while, Dave.
The county at that time had actually eliminated their human services department for a couple of years. Predates us all, but as far as the current board, but yeah. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Moving into the detailed programs, I'm again not going to speak to any specific details in here, unless you have a question right now, but you do have a month to chew on it. Please let me know if you have any questions about that. All right, moving into page 6, our budget summary. We are expecting to see some increases in revenues in different areas. Mainly for regional water support is a big emphasis in the next year and coming years that we have. We're also seeing an increase for things like our DSHS, our developmental disability program. And then also as well, a major uptick in our investment income. We have been budgeting quite a bit less than we should have the past few years. And so we're trying to get caught up with that while remaining conservative on that. Expenditures, we are expected to have 7.1 in salaries and benefits. We have very incremental increases throughout. You can see right here, provider services DD down more towards the bottom of the page. There's a $625,000 increase, which is in line with our increase for the program as a total. BCHP, those are more or less just flopping from federal to state, and we have additional GWAMA PFAS expenses. The
there any questions?
Which line are you looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry, probably should have numbered them. So provider, service, state, medical, there's a federal and a state in parentheses.
Okay. Very
That's the BCHP. The line above that, professional services other, is where we're showing a lot of the PFAS guama.
good. Okay.
And then DD is at the bottom of the provider services there. Those are, that's making the majority as far as our operating, the largest operating changes. Which are increases. Moving into the second half, and we'll circle back to the enhanced piece. We're working through the operating budget. So we're having, we're going to see, expect to have a decrease in expected equipment purchases. We're not expecting to buy any cars or vehicles this next year. Something that is new to the budget summary is software agreements. There has been a shift in the way that software is provided. Instead of buying it once and you get to have it forever, you have to pay annual little fees on it. So instead of making one big purchase, you got to do little purchases for the rest of your life.
Is there any way to reverse that?
You have to track it differently too.
Yeah, yeah. So there's also a new GASB coming out that has come out that for licenses, software licenses, you have to treat it like also like a leasing, like you're leasing equipment. And so you have to book the asset and the liability part of that. It's actually fairly difficult to work through. The get out of free jail card for that is if you have annual licensing. So if you have a multi-year licensing, you have to book this entry, the liability expense side. But if you just have an annual license, if you can get out of it in 12 months, it's considered short-term, then you don't have to do that. And so we aim for short-term licenses, really going through. But we do have an annual or a long-term license that we will be picking up here soon is the Acela. I'm sure that many of the county commissioners know that we are migrating from on-prem, I mean that Yakima County Services holds Acela. We're migrating to the cloud, which is a big endeavor that we're working through with Yakima County and EH. That is really a direct investment in the community to provide, be easier to pull out information when you want to know the most violations, and hopefully it'll be easier as much as we're investing in this program. So that is the operating. I'm going to move. Yes, Kyle.
Just really quick on salaries. How do we, for our folks, typically handle like increases? Is it across the board? Is it by department? Like, is it a 2%? Do you piggyback off of what the county commissioners decide for our county workforce? Just kind of how do we handle that?
Well, we have, our increases are 3%. And so we used to have, when I first came here, we had a 20-step process, which seemed quite lengthy. And also working with our unions, it was automatic increases, which was also a little surprising because we wanted to make certain that we were reaching everyone, making certain that they were supported, but also doing their jobs well. So we've changed that to a 10-step process. So we have 1 through 10, and then we go to pay for performance, which is both beneficial for the staff and also for us. It means that staff, if they're doing really well, can continue to earn increases, but that becomes something that then is discretionary. Well, it's graduated, so you can have different levels of reaching your. Essentially, if you're doing quite well, you can achieve the 3%. If there are things that you're doing well, 2%. If you need to make improvements, 1%, and so on.
Yeah, there's goals set at the beginning of each year, and there's also core competencies. So if you're meeting core competencies, you get a percent. If you're exceeding, like you're an exemplary employee, then you would get more.
So assume that's based on performance reviews.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Basis.
So again, we shrunk it from 20 steps to 10. That took a long time working with three unions, because there was sort of an expectation of an automatic increase. But again, that wasn't tied to performance, and that was our concern. Because again, James assisted us.
That was it. You got it.
So that's our process. Now we have, full disclosure, we have many new staff. We've had transitions into retirement, so we have new staff. So they're on that trajectory of the first through the 10 steps. But we have changed the pay for performance for some of our senior staff who've been here for more years, and it's worked out well. And again, the thing that's nice is it allows for them to continue to earn based on performance. You know, we had some staff who reached a certain level and they were not going to receive any more increases, but their attitude towards performance might have changed a little bit. So that's what we wanted to change. And so each person, whether they're one day on the job or 10 years on the job, that the goal is increasing the ability to serve the public. So
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Andre. So back into our enhanced budget. Sorry, back up to page 6. We do have some funding earmarked specifically for the OEM. We got a nice chunk of change in there for that, so that we can help invest into our community. We budgeted $500,000, and then back down again. Apologize, this isn't on the same page. I'd also like to highlight our capital expenditure, 1.5. Not only are we looking at expanding the building, but there could be possible additional expenses, and as many people know that have gone through a remodel, there's always something. Something you didn't plan for or expect.
May I give an update, if you mind?
Sure, absolutely.
So I wanted to support Chase with our working on this. Chase and Ryan and myself have spent a lot of time on this enhanced budget. Essentially, the enhanced budgeting is allowing us to use our savings as part of our operating budget this year. So with board approval, that allows us to make the investments that we're making. Obviously, a large one is the expansion of the building or the renovation of this building. But also, I wanted to point out as an update that we have had information brought to us by the county facilities department and also our conversations with the Office of Emergency Management. The project appears to be a $2.6 million project. I don't know when that begins again because we're supporting that project. But we feel strongly that investing in the local portion of that match, if you will, allows for a number of things. It shows commitment to state and federal funders that we're serious about it. It's something that, through our discussions we had last year around cold weather concerns, allows us to have a very functional and immediate operations center. It also allows us at the health district to make an investment in all communities in this valley, because that means that the cities and the county don't have to make those investments. And again, the Office of Emergency Management is a membership organization and relies on the investments made from the cities and the county. And so this allows us to make, again, a community investment on behalf of all of us, which we feel very good about. So just want to give you some background. And again, we can't deploy this money unless it's part of our budget and it's approved by the board. Did I do that justice, Chase?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Andre. Yes, OEM is very much a critical partner in the valley, and if we can help them out with a catalyst funding, that is something we'd be happy to do. So that concludes a budget of $15,699,828. I think I should have just come up with another $200 to make it 15.7. That would have been a little easier to say. That wraps up the budget. If there is any questions, please let me know. Hopefully we'll be voting to approve it next month this time. And in the meantime, if there's anything, please reach out. All right, thank you. So that completes the budget presentation. Now on to audit. Out of the frying pan into the fire. We are going to experience a 3-year compliance audit starting next week, beginning of October. They will be auditing our contracts and grants through the COVID period. So it was a bumpy time. So hoping for a smooth audit. Moving into the financials. I'm not sure what page starts on page 9. I'm picking up a lot of time, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. For the month of August, we had a gain in excess revenue of $173,000, bringing excess revenue to approximately 123 for the year. Through the end of August, our budgeted revenue through the end of August was $7.8 million, and our actuals coming in at $9 million. Expenditures, our allocated budget was 8.3, and our actuals coming in at $7.7 million. moving into the income statement. Not a lot to notice here. Investment income continues to be a shining star. That is certainly a source of revenue generation that we did not expect this last year. We're grateful for that. Moving down into the expense columns, as far as the monthly expenses, there is not a lot to notice. I would point out the provider services for DB. We are way over budget from last year, $484,000, and that's a lot for our increase for our next year. We're level setting for that to make sure that our providers, we're not having to come out for a budget amendment, because our providers, we want them to have as much money as they can possibly generate for that, because they provide a really good service. Moving into the next section. Our expenses through the end of August is at 7.7 million. For the 2024 budget, we have an approved budget of 12.4 million. So at this time of year, I start looking at the end of the year. We have about $4.8 million to spend. So we are underneath that by approximately, at this point in time, $628,000. So we have room. Doesn't look like we'll be in a budget amendment. Okay, moving into the program sections. FPHS really dominates a lot of our activities. And again, I'm not speaking to anything specific unless there is any specific questions. The last half of the program income section. Is there any questions? Okay, cash flow. We had an uptick in cash in the month of August. We received our FPHS funding. We expected that uptick in cash of approximately $1.5 million. And this will start to taper out as we move throughout the year. That wraps up my my report. Thank you.
Any questions for you? Thank you, Chase. We will move on. We will help with the champion of the new bar.
Morning. You know, all kinds of things going on with thousands of articles. The Mpox is still in the news. We continue to monitor the clade that's in Africa, which is different from the clade that's in the U.S. Clade in Africa can cause a more serious disease. It's spreading in Africa, and we continue to look, particularly in Europe, for the movement of clade 1 into European population. So they've only identified, as I said last month, one person that had traveled to Africa and brought it back to Sweden, but it doesn't seem to be spreading at all in Western Europe. Yes.
Just a quick question, just to clarify, Mpox, is that what we used to call monkeypox?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it was like bad for monkeys to have that.
They were feeling bad about that. Okay.
Yeah, the disease did originate in the monkeys. So in order to deal with that, you know, the obvious way to stop the spread is to stop more people from getting it in Africa. So several European countries and the US are donating over 1 million vaccines to those sub-Saharan countries to in the attempt of stopping more cases. So fewer cases, fewer chance of spread. So that's the big news on monkeypox. There's still a supply in the national stockpile, and I haven't heard anything from DOH about distribution to the counties. Have you heard anything, Melissa?
They were working directly with the New Hope Clinic, which serves our HIV positive patients, to see if they're interested in obtaining vaccines.
And I will investigate that more closely this afternoon when I'm over there. There's also new Mpox vaccines that are coming onto market that have been approved and shown to be effective. One of them is made in Europe. So that's the update on Mpox. Moving on to another topic, which is hard to get your hands around because there's
so many different ways it's happening. It's multiple antibiotic resistant pathogens. So it's bacteria and various fungus that are in the environment. The predicted deaths over the next 25 years, 39 million cases related to acquisition and infection with multiple antibiotic resistant bacteria. For those of us who work in the hospital, this is not an unusual situation, but the numbers at this time are low. So this is related to a very high utilization of antibiotics, antifungals, both in clinical practice, overprescribing antibiotics to patients who don't need them, also in agriculture, where insecticides and pesticides and antifungals are used to keep the products from, to prevent loss of those products from those organisms. And if you add everything up with the expected number of cases and deaths in humans, they estimate $1 to $3 trillion being spent in excess by 2030. And once again, the biggest risk for death is for people over 70. So one more reason not to grow old. The highest rate of multi-drug resistant bacteria occurs in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, just because of utilization, and the organism most commonly isolated with multi-drug resistance is tuberculosis. So when you can't treat tuberculosis because there's no available drugs, it leads to a higher incidence of death. One of the newer pathogens that we've dealt with, still in small numbers, is an organism called Candida auris. This is normally it was an environmental organism that wouldn't cause much trouble because it was susceptible to fungicides, and now it's resistant to fungicides, which is translating over to resistance in humans. They get this infection. So there's been active surveillance for this organism, led by King County Public Health, where most of the cases have occurred. But if those folks get transferred, Yakima, to a nursing home, that can cause a problem. So if somebody's in a hospital in Seattle and they move to a nursing facility here, those infection control people are supposed to call the local infection control people to make sure that folks who are carrying that organism, there's extra precautions taken with hand washing and use of gloves and wearing barrier precaution like the gowns that you might see in the hospital. So in the broader sense, preventing infections with antibiotic resistant organisms, particularly bacteria, for those organisms that have vaccines available, vaccinating people before they get infected to prevent them from developing infection is one of the better strategies. Of course, stewardship with antibiotics is also an effective strategy, but not going on effectively at all hospitals and all practices. So sometimes educational efforts are important among the healthcare providers. And as an example, about 15, 20 years ago, there was real push by the American Academy of Pediatrics to decrease antibiotic use in kids who have inner ear infections, or middle ear infections rather. And what was happening is the overuse of antibiotics was creating a situation where people colonized with pneumococcus but not infected with it were developing pneumococcus resistant strains, and those were much harder to treat, of course. So that educational effort resulted in a decrease of antibiotic use in middle ear infections in kids, and overall it's had a profound effect on the isolation of antibiotic resistant pneumococcus. So most of the middle ear infections are caused by virus. So they developed a protocol to allow pediatricians to observe the patient for a certain interval of time, and if it failed, then to prescribe antibiotics. Since most of them were virus, the kids were better in 3 days and no antibiotics were prescribed. So more of that needs to go on, particularly in hospitals. And sometimes there is competing goals. So one thing that goes on in hospitals commonly is a protocol for treating people that look like they have serious infection, which we call sepsis. And that's led to, in the efforts to save people from sepsis, it's led to overuse of antibiotics and the emergence of resistant bacteria. So those protocols need to be fine-tuned, and the people who put those out are working on it. So in the meantime, we're always playing catch up. So that's antibiotic resistance, not a great topic to hear about, because there's a chance that all of us will run into a situation where we're in the hospital, we might need an antibiotic and there isn't one that'll work. Another update, pertussis. So far in 2024, there's been 146,000 cases. In the whole year of 2023, there were 3,475 cases. And that it's an interesting sort of conundrum that's happened. The immunity from the vaccine, which is Tdap, pertussis vaccine is included in the Tdap vaccine, which you would get for tetanus and diphtheria. The pertussis component of that is the weakest, so it lasts the shortest amount of time. You need a booster every 10 years. And many of the kids are not getting the booster for a variety of reasons. So that means right at this time, teenagers, there's a lot of teenagers that haven't been boosted, so they have no vaccine protection, and they're the ones that are getting pertussis. So it's a disease of younger folks. You know, I've been getting my booster every 10 years. I go, it's in my medical record. When I need it, it pops up. And the electronic record's been very good about reminding the doctors about when the vaccines are due. But if you don't do the booster, your immunity wanes and you get pertussis. So that's going on right now. The other thing that's contributing to the increased cases during COVID, people were wearing various masks. Now, unlike COVID, which is many, many times more contagious and also airborne, pertussis is droplet, which means if you cough or sneeze and you're within 6 feet, you have a risk of picking it up. Putting a mask on almost negates that effect because the mask traps the droplets. People aren't wearing masks as much because COVID's not as big as a threat. So that's another contributing factor to the big increase in cases. So that's the update for pertussis.
Question, Dr. Martin. The booster you get if you go in with a cut on your hand to the ER with tetanus, is that also covering your pertussis?
It should be Tdap that they're giving. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what they should be offering, because most people are ready for a Tdap, not just a tetanus.
So the same tetanus vaccine is in the Tdap, but you know, if they do give Tdap, you get double. You get a double. Moving to a completely different topic, but kind of like antibiotic resistance to pesticides. They've done several papers showing that pesticide exposure, which is usually people that are spraying or are in the areas where the spray is aerosolized, have increased risk of colorectal cancer and pancreatic cancer. And the article that I had read said that the risk for cancer of those types with exposure to pesticide is actually higher than the risk of cancer exposed to cigarette smoke. So that's going to continue to be a high risk exposure. Fortunately for us, most of these cases and exposures are occurring in the Midwest because the cornfields, a lot of pesticides used in cornfields. Of course, we use them on our fruit trees, then the risk is higher. It's just not as high as in the Midwest. So another reason to live in Washington. Now, very interesting environmental issue is our increase in the number of dry days or more drought. This has led to an increase in cases of what is called valley fever, which occurs in Central California, but it also occurs in Washington State. Because if you look at the climate in Central California, it carries up through Oregon and carries up through Central Washington. It's the same sort of climate conditions, just we have more cold days than Central California. And when there is more drought, the soil becomes more dusty. And there's an organism normally present in the soil called coccidioides. And that organism is the cause of valley fever. So when it's dry, dusty, and stuff's blowing around, then it rains. It's a time like in the desert where the cactus blooms, the coccidioides blooms. So if you happen to be in these areas, like our area here, after a rainstorm with a big summer of drought, the number of cases will go up. Fortunately, 60% of the cases are relatively asymptomatic, and only 10% of people exposed to this organism develop severe disease, and 8% of the people develop, actually 3% of the people develop disseminated disease. So there is treatment for it, and the big thing of how to deal with it is to educate healthcare providers that this occurs. Nobody thought it occurred in Washington. I've been here 25 years. The first year I was here, we identified a case. And then a paper was written from Tri-Cities about cases in Central Washington. CDC came and investigated, and we have our own strain of coccidioides. It's different from California strain. So, you know, it's like, do we have actually better wine here? I think we do. So we have our own strain of wine as well. So interesting because of this climate relationship to the disease.
Symptoms are going to be more respiratory, coughing,
Flu-like. So for us who also live in the state of Washington, there was a study done in Europe showing that a hop extract called Amarisate actually decreases craving for food, thus could be a weight loss thing. So yay to our hop industry. So far as I know, they're not making it. But if
Drink more ale.
drink more Amarisate. I like that. They studied this in people that were actually food deprived, so they were really hungry, and they gave them this drug and they didn't feel like eating so much. So it kind of a interesting study, and hopefully we can get maybe John Haas to look at this and make some Amarisate. But just a mildly humorous side.
Just Commissioner McKinney. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I was going to hold a question until Dr. Bark was done speaking, if he's not done with this update, but thank you.
I'll call back on you then. I was just going to put in a plug for the Fresh Hop Ale Festival just coming up.
Last update, of course, we couldn't have a session without H5N1. To date, there's been 2 cases that have been identified without exposure to cattle. It's not known whether there was some other animal they were exposed to that could carry it, like cats or something, but you know, as far as people investigating it, they couldn't tell. And then also along with that, there's been no known human-to-human spread, which is the most important thing to predict whether it's going to be a big outbreak. So the virus has been around for 20 years. It probably needs several mutations to become effective at spreading from people to people. So not happened yet. Still can happen. CDC is still worried about it, but they're not making any recommendations because it's not bad enough for them to do that. They're watching it closely. One of the ways they do that is by surveillance and wastewater. If they identify influenza A, it's sent for more definitive tests to see if it's H5N1. That's ongoing. Just to give you an idea of what's going on, there's several millions of cases in wild birds. So if you find a dead bird on your property, don't go near it. And if you do, I don't know if animal control will deal with that or not. Do you have any idea?
I think they usually just tell you leave alone. They don't send off.
Yeah. Some animal's going to get to it.
Depending on the bird, Fish and Wildlife could respond, but not very often.
Yeah. So there's dead birds around. Just don't go anywhere near them. Poultry, our outbreaks have been reported in 48 states, over 100 million cases in poultry. And we're up to now 231 dairy herds in a total of 14 states that have been tested positive. Overall, as of September, there's been 14 human cases identified, 4 with symptoms. 4 came from cow exposure, 10 from poultry exposure. Good news is that the current flu vaccine will prevent you from getting severe disease, but it won't prevent you from getting infected. So another reason to get the current flu vaccine, which we're almost going to enter the optimal time for getting, which is the month of October. And when's our flu workshop?
For our staff is next Tuesday.
Okay, so we're right on target. So we will continue to see sporadic cases after exposure to infected herds or birds, cattle herds, that is. They'll continue to look for human spread. And as long as we don't see that, this becomes an interesting topic and not an emergency. And with that, I'll close my report.
Thank you. Commissioner, you have a question?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Dr. Garg, I know that just as a parent with young kiddos exercising out in the heat, it's been, I think increasingly we're seeing young adults and teenagers having severe heart issues on the field. And I'm just wondering, are you aware of any ongoing studies to see why it seems that there's an increase of healthy young adults who are collapsing and having major heart issues in that teenage young adult section of our society right now?
Oh, I'm not sure we all understood. Is it, you say, heart disease in teenagers?
I think physical exertion and concerns around heart-related issues.
Oh,
For athletes on the field, I think you just specifically asking.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, I'm speaking about athletes specifically.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything specific about that, but there has been reports of athletes getting sick during training, you know, getting ready for the season in hot weather, more so than we'd seen in the past. And having been a varsity sports player in high school, playing a game in hot weather, practicing in hot weather, it was bad, you know, 45 years ago, actually more than that, about 55 years ago. So I think with their increased temperature, average, it's going to be worse. But I haven't seen anything specific about that, Commissioner McKinney.
Thank you, sir.
You were speaking earlier about antibiotic resistance, and you mentioned sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia as particular, you know, higher risk for this. Where do we stand in the country in relationship to other countries?
Well, their problems are mostly with tuberculosis, and tuberculosis is contagious from people that are in the community. In the hospitals, it's an ongoing problem because of patients who are unknown to be carrying the organism, and without good hand washing and other barrier precautions, that organism might spread from a person who doesn't have a problem with the infection, like say you had a fractured hip and they pinned it. If they're then the person in the next bed maybe is being treated for a disease with an agent that affects their immune system. That patient picks up that resistant bacteria, then gets a serious illness. We have fewer antibiotics and sometimes no antibiotics to treat that. So locally, I don't know because I'm not the hospital epidemiologist anymore, but I would imagine there's going to be cases from time to time, as there were when I was the hospital epidemiologist. And if you go into larger cities and larger hospitals, the problem's more acute. And to take some of the largest hospitals in Seattle, for instance, they have many more cases. The percentage is the same, but because they have 400 to 500 beds and they're always filled, the chance of antibiotic resistance spreading is much higher. And they have more people available to work on it. And Harborview has several physicians that are doing it and a bunch of hospital trained nurses that go around and do surveillance. So everybody's keeping watching this all the time. It's not just like the last 2 years. We've been dealing with this for 30 years. You know, penicillin in the 50s, penicillin came out in the 40s. In the 50s, there were already penicillin-resistant strains, just as an example. So every new antibiotic that comes out, if it's overused, resistant strains emerge. So again, it's overutilization of antibiotics.
Follow up on that, Dr. Barg. The fungal infections that we're seeing, is it that the organism is picking up resistance, or is it that there's no new antifungal drugs that are being developed? What does the horizon look like for that?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of antifungal drugs that are effective against the pathogens that exist, like for instance, aspergillus in an oncology patient. There are good drugs for that. What's happening is with widespread use of antifungals, there are strains that are in the environment and the resistant strains are selected for by environmental pressure. And then those strains are picked up by people who then carry them in the nursing homes and hospitals when they get sick. So it's, you know, I was reluctant to have fungicide put on my front lawn. Yeah, everybody know what fairy ring is? It's when there's a circle of enhanced growth of the grass, and then mushroom heads pop up in it. And you can kill it with fungicide, but I didn't think it was worth it. I kind of like the way they look.
And as far as a drug development for fungicidal drugs?
Yeah, drug development for resistant bacteria as well as fungicidal drugs is not well funded because the companies who would traditionally do the trials and stuff, it costs a lot of money. And the number of patients that need it the sales of those drugs isn't high enough. So there's various options out there for research to go on and develop new agents, but really it's this end that needs to be reduced as an antibiotic reduction rather than going on this end. This is cheap, this is expensive. Any other questions?
You have anything else for us, Dr. Bard?
This is spelling test.
Pardon?
A spelling test on all the words he used.
Start now.
The first one is pleasing milkshake.
Yep,
Yeah, that one. Thank you, Dr. Bard. We will move on to our disease control.
Okay, so this Sunday marks CDC Week 40, which is when we begin our RSV and flu surveillance with the local hospitals from all 3 of our hospitals. So they'll report to us weekly the amount of flu and RSV tests that they did, along with how many were positive and negative, so we can kind of look at the trends going on within Yakima County. And then it's usually about a week after that, week and a half. It gives us time to get the reports in, and then we post that information on our website. So you'll be able to go to our website and see all of the trends that are going on throughout the flu season for Yakima County. And then I was just going to talk a little bit on overdoses. I know last month we had talked about kind of a spike that had happened. I believe it was you, Dr. Atterbury, that had spoke about that spike that happened back in April, May timeframe. Our epidemiologist looked into it a little bit. She's still doing some more research on it to look at statewide and nationally. But when you look at that, along with the information that we got from information being submitted from the emergency rooms, it aligned with fentanyl overdoses, along with the overdose spike that we were having just in general. So compared to other drugs. So it really looks like potentially there may have been, you know, a bad batch or drugs that came into our county that had high levels of fentanyl in it. So something that we're doing some more research on. It also kind of coincided with the Narcan distribution that was happening in our harm reduction. There was an increase in that as well. So people were obviously using their Narcan for this large amount of fentanyl that it most likely came into our county. So then we had an increase in people requesting additional doses of Narcan at our harm reduction site. So that's just some preliminary data that we had on that. And then I wanted to share, Rudy, if you'll pull that up, just a graph that our epidemiologist had put together on what our death trends have looked like for overdoses in Yakima County. You can see what this graph goes back to 2016 with 26 cases up to this year through August 31st, we've had 92. So it's looking like we are probably going to surpass our highest year, which was 2021. We are on an upward trend. I will say from our harm reduction site, we have distributed over 2,200 Narcan kits through our harm reduction site with a reported 400 overdose reversals with that Narcan. Those are just the ones that have been reported to us through harm reduction. And then part of the information that we're also gathering is working with the King County Coroner's Office, who obtains data from our local coroner's office that gives more detailed information, including risk factors that individuals have for overdose deaths. It collects a lot of data. And one of the things that we've been able to determine so far on the information is that 43% of drug overdose deaths had an opportunity for intervention of the ones for Yakima County, including bystanders being present, current or prior substance use disorder treatment, the descendant's fatal drug use witnessed, known history of drug overdose, known history of mental health diagnosis, and recent release from an institutional setting. So definitely something as we get our overdose review panel up and running, those will be things that we'll be looking at for overdose prevention. And that's the end of my report. Any questions?
That data that King County is providing us, is that something that we're already doing the research locally, sending it to King County, and the health district is asking King County to
Yeah, so they're taking, our coroner's office submits all the raw data. They participate with King County. There's multiple counties that do, but not all. But our coroner's office is participating and entering this data. And then King County is taking that raw data and submitting it to counties who wish to have it. So it's something that we just discovered that we requested that we start getting that data because it's really entering information as to risk factors for each individual.
And is that available online?
No, it's that level of data is protected, so it's provided to local health jurisdictions and those who have the coroner's office, obviously.
And if I heard you correct, I just want to reiterate that. Did you say that what percentage of people that were overdosed were recently institutionalized?
So it was a 43% total had interventions that could have been done, but for institutionalized were 5%. So we know that people who are institutionalized, they especially if the longer that they're institutionalized, they develop their tolerance lessens. And so when they go out and they use for the first time, their risk of overdose is much higher because they don't have that tolerance anymore.
Is there any feedback to those institutions of a near miss or a potentially avoidable death?
I do know that there are some, and I don't know if you guys are, but I know Triumph works with the jail to provide Narcan and education upon release. I don't know what your facility is doing.
Yeah, we do provide education and Narcan or ways to get Narcan upon release. Also, if it's within a certain time frame, it's a reportable death.
Sure. That's what I was really inquiring about, was whether these are reportable deaths, and if so, you know, who collects that data?
And not through the health district, but you have a great program that you've all just started as well. I don't know if you want to.
And it's reportable through Joint Commission and other sources. We have to report it through the ASOs, the NCOs, the state, so it's reportable from people.
Well, I mean, I guess in dealing with high-risk behavior individuals, you're going to have a certain percentage of incidents, and we try and minimize that, but I'm not certain we can mitigate our way out of that situation because you're dealing with high-risk individuals who are using drugs and you know, there's no warning sign on the drug. There's no, if they were making good decisions, they probably wouldn't be in that situation, I guess.
Yeah, they do try to educate people, kind of that harm reduction piece if you're going to go do something.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's so unfortunate.
Well, I'm struggling with the overdose review board. That's something new that we're going to start up, and I'm like, what do we just don't use is, you know, kind of what are we going to learn from it?
It's similar to our child death review where we're looking for initiative, things that we could have looked at an intervention, collaborating with other partners, such as we've partnered with Neighborhood Health to be able to hand out lock boxes and trigger locks for guns to protect children, you know, for gun safety. So the overdose review board is something that the state is really pushing because of the crisis that's going on. So it will be the same concept, looking at overdoses of every age and looking at, you know, where we identify that there's interventions that could have happened, you know, maybe collaborating with more partners to ensure that everyone who gets released from the jail is sent with a Narcan and education provided to those individuals, that they have resources to maintain sobriety, you know, just anything that we could see where we can actually make a difference. You know, the biggest bang for our buck is for overdose.
Do you think we're going to learn anything from?
I think we will be able, what we've learned from child death review is there's a lot of people doing different things. And when you all come together and realize what's actually being happening in the community, we're able to put the pieces together essentially and create a much more effective initiative.
Commissioner Curtis, I was just going to mention that one of the beauties of having these review boards is it's bringing people together focused on one issue only. For busy people that are managing multiple missions, it's hard, but you're talking about mental health services, social worker, certainly law enforcement, you know, bringing mental health counselors together. It's allowing for a conversation that, again, often happens siloed and people think of it as their mission only. It creates an opportunity for a more systems approach.
Is the overdose review board also on overdoses where there's folks that survive, not just deaths?
The one we're going to be looking at is deaths, overdose reviews. Overdose death reviews. Yep, it'll be just on deaths.
I think we're missing the point of those that are overdosing. I mean, you could, seems like we would have a better impact on those that have survived, and how do we help?
The deaths are, we don't get information from individuals who overdose. We do get, however, because it's reportable for deaths, we do get those, so we know which ones have deceased, and we can do a thorough also look back at their ACEs. Was there troubling things that caused them, that led them to addiction? And you know, it's going all the way back, not just to the current overdose situation that happened, but all the way back to the ACEs of the childhood.
Yeah, I can see that. I think first responders all report everything. See and manage what are the true accurate numbers for the area that overdoses.
That is one more update, though. We are working with ODMAP and also Save Yakima Valley is also part of this, and just trying to get all of our first responders set up through to where they're entering overdose responses into what we call ODMAP, which is real-time data for overdoses, including fatal and non-fatal overdoses. One of the barriers is that for anyone who's not using Spillman, which is the system that the county uses, there are some fire departments who use an interface called Image Trend. And instead of having to enter the data through Image Trend reports that they're going on this call, then they have to go manually into ODMAP to enter this, and they don't have the resources. YHD will be providing the first year of service for that to be able to, it will automatically go in when they put the information into their system, Image Trend, it'll automatically go into ODMAP, which will help us gather real-time data for Yakima County.
The YHD is going to provide it for all purchases.
For the 4 that are unable to fund it or manually implement it themselves. Most of them are.
The goal is that every community will have input. That's what we're looking for, is to have real data because everyone's inputting.
And Edie, you bring up a good point with regards to outcomes data measurement in general. We look for finite outcome data always. And so death is an easy marker to measure, right? Anything short of death is like, well, were they close to death? How close to death? You know, that's a very hard thing to actually put your finger on measuring. And so it makes all research related to it a lot more gray and a lot less black and white. Whereas, you know, outcomes from death are finite, so therefore easy to metricize.
Yeah, I kind of piggybacking off what Melissa was saying, just off of the last Sims conversation, there was Yakima Fire reported 1,300 that they manually tracked over, I think it was a 3-month period of potential overdoses where I can't remember, was Yakima Police Department? I believe it might have been the Sheriff's Department input 250 over the same time period into that maps. So if you think about it, fire is responding to a significant higher number that they aren't putting into maps.
And that's one that they are one of the largest ones, and that's one that we will be helping to get set up for automatic.
And then it was reporting to the states, and the states kind of panicking, saying, you guys are triggering us every day by high numbers, they're spiking. And I guess my question is, are all areas also using ODMAPs? And if not, is everybody going to be spiking as they start using?
Yes, I get calls often with concerns. With concerns from our state partners saying we're seeing a spike, and I'm saying it's not a spike, it's input. Or guess what? We have an overdose crisis in Yakima. Welcome to it. I'm not trying to poke fun at it, but the concern has been here. The awareness by our state partners at looking this data, but again, the data I feel is not fully consistent because it doesn't include all of those resources.
There's no data baseline.
Well, it's a skewed database, and so that's what we're trying to address. My compliments to Melissa and the team, but also our partners in trying to address this, because this goes back to our original discussion with the board well over a year and a half ago, which was how do we have accurate information to show where investments need to be made? Where are the areas in our community where we are seeing the most need? That's one of the issues that we're having is the ODMAP will allow you at least to see, you're looking at the potential for overdoses, not just deaths, but overdoses. Where are your concentrated areas? So if you will, your hotspots, where all partners can focus their efforts. So this has been exciting for us. The other is that our harm reduction site, while to Dr. Atterbury's point, it's not finite. We're able to get feedback, as I'm sure you and your counselors are, feedback from users about what they're seeing and how they're using. So that's been a wonderful addition when it comes to our harm reduction site, to be able to hear from people saying they are now carrying naloxone or they are using it with their friends essentially. And so we're witnessing less death on the street.
Well, maybe I'm being naive, but it seems like if somebody's experienced an overdose, now's the time to get to them, to try to engage them. Yeah. I think that's a scary situation that maybe they could engage in services.
Or not. I mean, I hear stories from our first responders that revived someone 12 times and they're still not at that point. Yeah.
Same report in that they revive them and they're angry because you destroyed their high, and so they are going out looking for more. Sad.
One of the cultural things among the recreational drug use, one of the reasons these spikes occur because if someone overdoses on it, then the rest of the community that uses the same drug knows that that's very potent and they want to get high after all. So they go to that supplier and get the bad drug. Bad if you don't want to die, but good if you want to get high. And so that concentration of people buying from a supplier that has a fentanyl-rich product causes these spikes. And of course, once he's sold out of that, another product comes in that maybe doesn't have all that stuff. And so then people stop going to that guy and they find another guy that has the bad stuff.
So complicated.
That's one of the reasons why, again, our partnership with allowing people specifically with lived experience to provide options for treatment is so important. You may not reach someone on your first discussion or your second. It may be dozens of discussions, but that, again, trusted communication allows for people, if they're ready, to have that option. So it's a long process. It takes a great deal of patience in a non-judgment way. And so that's what we're working on. But, if I may, the thing though I want to thank the board for understanding is these investments that we can make on behalf of our partners allows for the transition of information that is far more valuable than the initial cost. So some of these costs we're talking $5,000. That $5,000 investment will allow us to have far more data, and certainly that data will be more transparent to ourselves and our partners.
Melissa, did you say there was 400 doses of Narcan administered, reported?
Overdose reversals from Narcan that we handed out at our harm reduction site yearly.
400 times? Wow, so that 97 deaths could be a lot higher without the Narcan.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely.
Anything else?
Well, I just will add the OD map, right? So it does give us the locations of where these overdoses are occurring, not where the individual lives, but where the overdoses is occurring. So it will help us for targeting areas and our partners, neighborhood health works a lot with the homeless population to be able to target efforts to specific areas where we have high overdoses occurring.
And the OD map, who's funding that?
That's actually a free system. It started in Baltimore. And so if you look at like the location, you can look at the locations. You have to be an LHJ or first responder to have access. But if you look at the map, the East Coast has a lot of people participating in this program. Washington State, the only areas that do are Yakima County, and then there's some reported in Seattle. But once we get this all set up with the 4 fire departments that need assistance, Yakima County will be the only county in the state of Washington that has pretty much, if not all, of our first responders reporting to ODMAP. So it'll be trendsetting for the state. Then hopefully we have WEMSIS, which is what the emergency personnel have to report to the state. But by the time your LHJ gets that data, it's 2 years old. It's not helpful for real time when you have a bad batch of drugs coming into your county or a huge spike. It's just not relevant when it's 2 years old.
And then maybe potentially we could export this to other counties that are significant risk pools. So, the ones outside of Portland, the ones outside of King, those counties that we know are a high incidence, and we might get interesting data.
Well, in fairness, Dr. Atterbury, actually, there's this issue is pervasive throughout Washington.
Right, so I mean, every county would be
It's
nice.
just so complicated, but one of the things also I want to compliment Melissa on is we really met many times, Ryan, Melissa, myself, Lillian, to talk about how we could find ways to track all this. It took a lot of sleuthing to realize there were systems out there.
Yeah.
They just had to be operable, and it took a long time really for Melissa to gain permission to even use this. That's one of the barriers, is how complicated it is to have access. It was an amazing amount of work. We're talking about 1.5 years now worth of work, which is complicated for me because the bureaucracy is not conducive to real-time data.
Sure.
But once it's done, we'll be able to replicate that in other counties, and that's something that we're happy to do with the support of the Department of Health.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but how does Yakima County compare to the East Coast, you know?
I haven't like dove in,
Okay.
but yeah, there's spots on the map, but I haven't dove in to see the numbers. I assume it's worse over there. They have xylazine going on, more so on the East Coast than we do here.
Well, we shall see.
Anything else, Melissa? Any further questions for Melissa? All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to environmental health with Sean McGee.
All right. Hello, everybody, again. So right now we have the fair going on. So our EH staff are out there working with the food vendors to make sure that the food for all the fair foodies is good and safe. So we'll continue that work this week. We're also, still working heavily in the response to the PFAS contamination and the East Sela area, and then our work in the Safe Drinking Water Initiative within the Guama. So that'll continue for the foreseeable future. We're also working with the Guama Implementation Committee. We're putting together a tour of the Lower Valley to take the new EPA representative that's working with the Implementation Committee, setting up a tour to take him around and show EPA all the great work that's being done within the Guama. So our role in that, we'll be talking about what our septic system licensing process is, and how we go about getting septic systems repaired or new septic systems in the ground that mitigates contamination of drinking water wells and things like that. And then also hopefully visiting a couple households that participated in the Safe Drinking Water Initiative to allow EPA to interact with some homeowners that have utilized the well sampling and the surveys and gotten bottled water delivery and a treatment system installed. So just kind of showcasing all the great work that we're doing. That tour, I believe, is set for October 18th. Other things we have going on for several of our solid waste facilities, we're going through operations manual updates with both the municipal landfills, Shannon Terrace Heights, and then our composting facility, Natural Selection Farms. So that's progressing well, and just kind of getting these updates to reflect some of the updates to these facilities have going on. For example, the Shannon Terrace Heights have a new gas extraction system, kind of a state-of-the-art system, much different than the one that existed at Terrace Heights before. So that's being included in their operations plan. That's going well. And then the last item I have is there seems to be a formation. We're looking into the formation of an East Side Local Health Jurisdiction solid waste group to meet regularly to discuss the different solid waste programs in Central and Eastern Washington, what coordination amongst different LHJs could help with the oversight and smoothing of operations at landfills and transfer stations and things like that. So we're excited to be involved in that, and we're kind of mimicking what the West Side does and how they coordinate their solid waste programs across different, multiple counties. Because there is a lot of solid waste that moves across multiple counties in eastern Washington. So coordination amongst different LHJs, I think, is vital as we all oversee those facilities in our specific counties. And those are my major updates for today.
Any questions for Sean? Thank you very much. Next, we move to public health partnerships. Like
As Andre mentioned, the Washington State Public Health Association conference will be here in Yakima from October 9th through October 11th. It is completely sold out. They're anticipating, I think, anywhere between 700 to 800 attendees. And I wanted to mention it because we actually have 3 staff members that will be presenting. They'll be presenting the topics around the outreach and education that was done around PFAS and East Sela, and then also the work that we've done, our community-based work that was done to increase access to naloxone, and also the overdose prevention work that's been taking place. So we're very proud of the team. It is a competitive process to present at those conferences. So I'm sure we'll be presenting some sort of version of that to the board as well, if you're not already planning on attending the conference. And then outside of that, as Melissa mentioned, along with the flu season starting, I wanted to remind everyone, we do have 2 websites that we keep updated during flu season, which is yakimavaccines.org and yakimavacunas.org in Spanish. That website has information on, has a list that we maintain on a bi-monthly basis on the list of pharmacies and clinics that currently carry the flu and COVID vaccine. Some people that are uninsured like to know beforehand how much it's going to cost me, and so we can make sure to have that list available. Also, what's on there is the list of different mobile events that will be taking place across the county, which brings, again, flu opportunities to people outside of the clinics and the pharmacies. Most of that work we do in partnership with the schools. So, for example, schools will host health fair events and will coordinate the DOH care event to come and provide routine immunizations, the flu, and COVID vaccines as well for those that are interested in getting it. So, and then just 2 quick updates on events that are taking place. A reminder, last month I talked about a developmental disabilities event that will be taking place on October 3rd, which is next Thursday at PNWU. As a reminder, that event is designed for anyone who's a caregiver for those with developmental disabilities that are going through their transition point in their life. And that transition being when they're getting ready to graduate high school. So it's a very, it can be a very confusing time, also very scary. Lots of people many families have gotten used to the routine of their child going to school and, thinking beyond that and what that's going to look like. There's lots of questions that come up. And so that's what this event is designed to provide answers to. So please make sure to share that. That'll be taking place again next Thursday. And then finally, later in the month of October, we'll be joining Safe Yakima Valley in their medication take-back day. So again, every October, there's events that are held throughout the valley to make sure that people take unused medications and properly dispose them, both to prevent environmental contamination, but then also to make sure that it stays out of the hands of people who don't need to be using them. And so we'll be joining them at the event actually to provide firearm lock boxes and locks. So again, making sure that we can provide different preventative opportunities to people, both for medication disposal and also firearm safety. So making sure we can get as many resources as possible in one event. And that will be held at El Triunfo Event Center, which is in Grandview. And again, that'll be October 26th. So I'll make sure to send that information out to everyone if you're interested. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. We have no further questions. We will move on into unfinished business. And the first is the 2025 public fee hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing at this point and ask Mr. Ibach if we have any communication.
Okay, well, we don't have anyone in person, but we did have someone that did submit a comment on the Group B annual treatment review fee. And it was Joe Stump who is the utilities manager for Yakima County Public Services. He just stated, thank you for letting us know about the proposed new fee. It does not sound unreasonable considering the extra time that health district will have in these with these systems.
Thank you. So if there's no other public comment, I'll close the hearing and open it up for discussion for the board. Any discussion by the board?
Just really quick, the mobile food level 1, like we didn't used to have 3 levels for mobile food. Now we do.
The fee's not changing. Level one mobile units were simply charged just the annual food license fee of $118. Annual level one food license. We're changing the name of that fee and breaking it out to its own category so we can better track our mobile units in our permit management system.
So it'll be the same
It's
cost.
the same fee. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, same dollar amount.
We're seeing a large spike in mobile food units, so we want to be able to track it.
Yes, very much so.
Any further questions or discussion?
I guess I would just say that it seems like a very reasonable proposal, and it's, you know, we're keeping the prices the same, we haven't increased anything. There's some new fee categories, as we've discussed before, which are based on the fact that it's actually trying to offer a little bit of flexibility, and I think give some of these vendors a break. So I have no objections to the proposal.
If there are no further questions or comments, then I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the fee schedule for 2025.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to accept the fee schedule for 2025. I would ask you to raise your hand, please, make an accurate count. All of those who agree, please say yes, raise your hand.
Eight.
Thank you. And I think Commissioner McKinney's having unanimous. Thank you very much. Passes.
May I ask? Commissioner Lindy, thank you for bringing up the issue of not raising fees or keeping them reasonable. We have worked exceedingly hard to not have a reason to raise fees. We again benefit from our work for a long period in trying to raise funds from the state legislature and form the Foundation of Public Health Services, which has allowed us to invest in our environmental health system. We do that also as a community investment, so we don't expect that individual users who receive a permit should pay for some of the services we provide, because we think that it's education, it's giving direction. Those are things that I don't think directly translate to a fee. So we're trying very hard. Also, we want to recognize that times are tough for people. It's not an easy environment. Costs are high, exceedingly high, not just for individual people buying eggs and bread, but for food service establishments. It's exceedingly expensive to provide quality food in the valley. So we don't want to raise fees if we can do so.
Thank you. All right, we will move on then to new business. And I believe that, Mr. Arbach, you're going to.
Yes, I'm happy to announce that the Yakima Health District received an award from the state auditor's office. The Washington State Auditor, Pat McCarthy, was in town last week and presented the State Auditor Stewardship Award to the Yakima Health District. There are 20, I believe it's 2,300 agencies, and the Yakima Health District received this award. The State Auditor Stewardship Award is presented in recognition of outstanding accomplishment and accountability, transparency, and good stewardship of public resources as we pursue the shared mission of government that works better and earns greater public trust. She did write a letter that she presented, and Mayor Byers was there along with a lot of our staff, and so I'll just read the letter that she wrote to our board members. The State Auditor's Office is pleased to recognize the Yakima Health District's leadership in promoting a culture of accountability over public funds and a spirit of cooperation in the audit process, even in turbulent times. The Yakima Health District was the oversight agency responsible for responding to the pandemic in Yakima County. As such, the district received a significant influx of federal COVID-19 funding totaling about $9 million from 2020 to 2023. Additionally, the district responded to many environmental hazard emergencies such as wildfires, underground fires at landfills, and contaminated groundwater. Despite these unanticipated challenges, district leadership consistently promotes a culture of accountability, adaptability, and financial integrity. Executive Director Andre Fresco and Senior Accountant Chase Porter are particularly noteworthy for their collaborative approach to the audit process and passion for accurate financial reporting. The district values our audits and has fostered a positive and professional working relationship with the Office of the Washington State Auditor. District staff worked collaboratively with us during the audit and in the interim, proactively evaluating the impact of new federal funding and changes in financial standards. The district embraces and consistently implements audit recommendations, sometimes even before the audit is finished. Strong internal control processes and commitment to making government work for the citizens is demonstrated by a history of clean audits. It is apparent that district management and staff want to be accountable to the citizens and good stewards of the public funds and are always striving for ways to improve their processes. The district understands the value of our audits and has fostered a positive and professional working relationship with the Washington State Auditor's Office. Thank you for your hard work and dedication to the citizens of Washington. Sincerely, Pat McCarthy, Washington State Auditor.
That's one of the day shows here, and I will tell you that they 2,300 agencies that they review, and maybe 10 get the award. So that's a pretty significant recognition of how well the team here does.
That's a long
Why Steve wanted to pass around? Oh, pass it that way.
Aside from applause, I just says congratulations, particularly to Chase.
Yes.
That's a real feather in your cap. I mean, to the whole organization, but especially to you, Chase. So.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm humbled and honored. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
High praise, high praise.
It really is.
Yes.
Do they waive our auditing fees if they?
That would be nice, but no.
Full disclosure.
Gifting a public funds.
Actually, full disclosure, we did talk about the fact that Workday has been such a great opportunity for us, and it creates incredible efficiencies, but the cost of the audit remains the same.
Yeah.
It does seem like in the several years that I've been sitting next to Chase, every time I sit next to him, he mentions another audit that we're going on.
Yeah, perpetual audit, yeah.
Not just one.
No.
Some years there's 3.
Yeah.
I do feel like we receive more audits than other agencies, but I don't know if that's true, but it certainly feels that way.
We get a few of our own.
Yeah. That's true. And I also.
Did the county get an award also for their,
I don't know. Well, I know the audits have gone pretty well. Not well enough to get an award yet.
Well, and also would like to recognize the directors and certainly Ryan, fiscal integrity, the fiscal process, people understanding how we spend money on behalf of the citizens is really important. Chase could not do his job if there wasn't awareness of how important fiscal integrity is. So it really is all the directors, and certainly Ryan has been working in partnership with Chase on this for many years. So thank you.
Yes, no, and a lot of the credit goes to the staff. They're the ones day to day. Audit is looking back at the activities that have already been done, right? And so we have strong internal controls, and that has a lot to do with the staff here. So I'm very grateful for my team and for the management around me. They're very much involved in the fiscal side of it. They're very much looking at budgets and contracts, and that's a great environment to work in.
And Chase also has been great about explaining to the staff that they shouldn't be concerned about an audit. You're doing your job well each and every day, and an audit is just a recognition of your hard work. And so that comfort, if you will, and transparency is great. They understand that the auditor's office is working on behalf of the people. And so it's really been a wonderful partnership for us. And it's a different environment. It's a different vibe, if you will, in the office when they come. And people are not concerned. It's not like the IRS is coming to shut the doors. So we're pleased about that.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other new business by the board this morning? If there is none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll move.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to adjourn to our next regular scheduled meeting on October 3rd, 2022. All those in agreement, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Great meeting this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Commissioner, I'm sorry.